is that gamma mu is anti-commutators are minus 2 eta mu. So this in particular implies that gamma naught square is 1 and gamma I square is equal to minus 1 for each other. So our main focus will be on the Lorentz transformation properties of this Dirac equation. Okay, the Dirac equation is supposed to be Lorentz covariant. Okay, and you have to review how that comes about. So Lorentz transformation is psi prime. Okay, so I'll use the transformed field by psi prime. So psi prime of x prime is r lambda psi of x, where x prime mu is lambda mu nu x mu. So this is more or less the standard way a field transforms. Okay, the prime field, transformed field evaluated at the transformed point x prime is related to the original field at the original point. Okay, but there is a matrix that multiplies it. Okay, so R lambda is some matrix. This is a 4 by 4 matrix which acts on psi. Okay, which acts on the Spinor space. Psi is a 4 component spinor, and this matrix acts on that in that 4 dimensional space. This matrix, okay, I'll not write down the explicit expression for this, okay, not at least not in general, but this matrix satisfies certain useful properties, and those properties are required in order to ensure, first of all, that two successive transformations of this kind also generates a Lorentz transformation. Right? If this is a Lorentz transformation, then and if you make this transformation twice, it better be another Lorentz transformation. So that's something that you have to ensure, and that requires some condition on R. And the second condition, of course, is that under this transformation the equation should be covariant, right? Which means that if the original field psi satisfies Dirac equation, then the new field psi prime also should satisfy Dirac. So these are the two conditions which you must impose on R of lambda.
Can we satisfy Dirac equation with del prime mu?
Well, psi prime is the transformed field, right? Its argument is dummy index, right? So that this holds for all x.
Okay.
So you can say psi prime of x satisfies Dirac. So in fact, you can rewrite this equation as follows. You can write psi prime of x is r lambda. So you see, x is nothing but lambda inverse x prime, right? From this, so x prime is lambda x, so x is lambda inverse x prime. So now x is a dummy index, so I can put this as psi prime of x. So this should be r lambda psi of lambda inverse x. Right? This is another way of writing the transformation law. Okay, and then this psi prime of x will satisfy also the Dirac equation with the same argument. Is that point here? And now these two requirements are guaranteed provided R of lambda satisfies certain conditions. So let me write down the conditions first, and then we will check that under those conditions these two requirements as I just mentioned actually hold. So R lambda satisfies first condition, and the second condition is R lambda inverse now, as I said, I will not need the explicit form of R lambda. But let me write down the expression for R lambda when lambda is infinitesimal. So if lambda is identity plus epsilon m, then R lambda is given by identity plus I by 2 by sigma mu nu at the Lorentz generators for the speeders, namely this is I by 4 For more generally, lambda you can construct R lambda by exponentiating this expression. Okay, but as I said, I will not really need the transformation rule for more general R lambda. Okay, is this okay so far? Are the statements clear? So let's now check that these two conditions are necessary, right? Why are they necessary? So consider two successive transformations. First by lambda 1 and then by lambda 2. So let's denote by psi 1 of x the transformed field that we get after the first transformation. So that we can read out from here. So this is R lambda 1 psi of lambda 1 inverse x. Okay. After the second transformation, okay, which is being applied on psi 1, so psi 2 of x will be R lambda 2 psi 1 of lambda 2 inverse of x. But psi 1 of x is here. Okay, so you basically substitute for this the right hand side with x replaced by lambda 2 inverse x. So this is R lambda 2 R lambda 1 psi of lambda 1 inverse lambda 2 inverse x. So which I can also write as R lambda 2 R lambda 1 psi of lambda 2 lambda 1 inverse of x. And so you see that if this condition is satisfied, then R lambda to R lambda 1 is R lambda to lambda 1. Okay, and this, if you compare with this transformation law, we can see that this is nothing but a transformation, a new Lorentz transformation with matrix lambda to lambda 1. Right? So this equality of this product R lambda to lambda 1 is necessary in order to guarantee that two successive transformations of this kind generates another Lorentz transformation. Now let's see why this is important. This will turn out to be important in establishing that the Dirac equation that we had written down is indeed invariant under Lorentz transformation, or covariant under Lorentz transformation. Right? So let's see how using this we can to the Lorentz covariance of the Dirac equation.
Sir,
Yes.
why is it necessary that both like R lambda 1, lambda 2 and the case where you will take lambda 3 equals to lambda 2, lambda 1,
Yes.
both will give you a same object? Why you require such thing?
Because if you didn't write it this way, then this is not a Lorentz transformation. Lorentz transformation rules are here, right? So the combination of the two transformations will not be a Lorentz transformation unless this holds.
True. So they will give you this will give you a different object compared if you go from first frame to second frame and then second frame to third frame.
Yes.
Or if you go directly to third frame, you will get two different objects.
Yes, but that's not what Lorentz transformation is supposed to do, right? If you are trying to represent the action of Lorentz transformation, right, then you have to ensure that if you make a Lorentz transformation to go from the first frame to second frame, and then from second to third, right, the combined transformation is another Lorentz transformation, right? The composition of two Lorentz transformations you know is another Lorentz transformation, right? So if that fails from the spinor, right, then that means that this is not a Lorentz transformation that we are describing.
It's like you can identify your frame like you have gone lambda 1, lambda 2, or you have directly gone to lambda 3.
Exactly. Okay. The point is that the Lorentz transformation tells us that you can go from 1 to 3,
Yeah.
okay, either directly or from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3, and they describe exactly the same transformation, right? So the composition rule for Lorentz transformation is already defined before you even introduce spinors, right? So now for spinors you have to follow that composition rule, right? If it doesn't follow the composition rule, that means it's not a Lorentz transformation in the standard sense. Is that clear? Okay, so for that it's necessary that this condition holds. Okay. But of course this condition should be automatic once you have constructed the R lambda, right? Which you haven't done here, but normally you write, you can exponentiate this and write R lambda for a finite lambda. Okay, but we will not do that explicitly. But whatever R lambda comes out from the analysis of by exponentiating this does satisfy both of these conditions. Second condition, okay, you can check explicitly using this, okay, at least for the infinitesimal transformation. First condition also you can check have a consistency check, but it's a little more complicated based on this. Okay, so let's now check the Lorentz covariance of the Dirac equation. So the Dirac equation or I gamma mu del mu minus m psi x equal to 0. Okay. We want to show that if this is satisfied, then this should also be 0. This is what we want to check. Okay, whether this implies this or not. Maybe this one. Does this imply this? Okay, because if this implies this, then that will establish that the Dirac equation is Lorentz invariant. So let's try to calculate this explicitly. So this is I gamma mu del mu minus m okay. So this I can write as I gamma mu now we are talking about just ordinary Lorentz transform. So lambda doesn't depend on space time. Right? So del mu can go here. This is lambda inverse rho rho sigma x sigma. Okay, so let's call this y rho. So del mu of this we can calculate by chain rule. This is del x mu. Okay, let me write now explicitly del x mu. Okay, this is del x mu. Argument has lambda inverse rho sigma times x sigma. Okay. So we can first apply del x mu on this quantity. Okay. That will generate essentially this mu derivative of x sigma will give you a delta sigma mu. Right? So that converts this sigma index to mu index. So this now can be written as I gamma mu or lambda inverse rho mu, and then the derivative of psi. Okay, but now with respect to this whole argument y rho. Okay, so del psi del y rho. Psi is a function of y. Okay. Is this okay? Minus m r lambda psi of y. Now we are going to manipulate this product gamma mu r lambda using this relation. So gamma mu r lambda is r lambda lambda mu nu gamma mu. Okay. So I can write this as I r lambda lambda mu nu gamma mu. Now lambda inverse rho mu, let's write it as it is. Is this clear? Now gamma nu's are matrices in the spinor space. In the spinor space, these are just numbers. Right? For fixed rho and mu, these are just numbers. Right? So you can move them anywhere you like. So you can bring it here. So lambda mu nu. So these two together, lambda inverse times lambda. You see the mu index is contracted. So this simply generates delta rho nu.
So where the last line? R lambda. This is last line.
R lambda.
I didn't get the last line.
Oh, from using this. So gamma mu r is r lambda lambda mu nu gamma nu. I just multiplied r lambda from the left. Okay, so that's what we are using. Is this clear? Okay, so this step, use this equation. Okay, using 2. We are using equation 2 to get here. So this gives to I. Now you see that r lambda is common, right? R lambda comes out. So r lambda times I. So delta rho nu. So that's gamma nu del psi del y nu. Gamma nu minus n psi. Is this clear? Okay, I just used this product as delta rho nu, so that converted that rho into nu. Okay, so gamma nu del y nu, that's what we are getting here. And this second part is as usual, m r lambda psi. Okay, m is of course just a number, so you can put it anytime. And now you see that this is the Dirac equation for psi. Okay. So this shows that if psi satisfies Dirac equation, okay, namely if this is 0, then psi prime also satisfies Dirac equation. Because this is, we started from here, right? Okay, so we wanted to check if this implies this. Okay. So we started by analyzing this, so we manipulated and we eventually got to the form where we can do it, write it at r lambda times this. Okay, and now we see that if this is 0, so if psi satisfies Dirac equation, then this is 0, because this is the Dirac equation for psi, and if this is 0, then this must be 0, right? Because you multiply by r lambda, it gets to 0. Okay, so this also satisfies Dirac equation. Okay, so this is the proof of Lorentz invariance of ordinary Dirac equation. Okay, and we see that this condition is necessary for that to happen. Okay, again, the R lambda that we construct, Lorentz transformation matrix that we construct, does satisfy this equation. I can leave this as an exercise. Check this. Actually, this is my R lambda. Into this one. Okay, are there any questions? So now we are going to use this information for constructing coupling of gravity to reactivity. So we had I gamma mu del mu minus m psi equal to 0. Okay, so now everything you have to think of as card space index. So the first thing we will do is to replace okay. So let me first write down the result, okay, which is the most natural generalization of what we have been doing, and then we will explicitly verify that indeed this is invariant. So the proposal is that you take this. Now think of psi. Okay, psi has Spinor index, right? Okay. So think of psi as the analog of the vector fields or the tensor fields that we have been writing in the flat space with flat space index. Okay. So you know that in that case, those have the property that those are scalars and a general coordinate transformation. Okay. So for psi, of course, to begin with, we have no notion of what the card space index means, because the index that psi carries is very defined from the mu index, right? The space-time index. So we will declare that that index is automatically flat space index. Okay, so psi alpha, okay, where alpha is the Spinor index, represents to us the analog of a field using flat space index. Okay. So more precisely, what this means is that we will declare the psi alphas are scalars under general coordinate transformation. Okay, so these psi alpha scalars under GCP.
Sir,
Yes.
So alpha is not even the local lowest transformation.
No, it's not local. It's not a flat index in that sense. Okay, but that will not bother us because we wrote down this abstract notation. Okay, so let me define what d mu is, then it will become clear. So what is d mu? D mu is del mu plus RA of omega mu, where we have to use the representation that we used for the for spinors. Okay, so RA has to be derived from R lambda that we used for the spinors. Okay. So more precisely, RA of M is I by 2 beta m AB sigma AB. Okay, we think of this as the flat space index. Okay, but let's listen a little differently. Now this doesn't solve our problem completely. Okay? So let's check if this is invariant on a general coordinate transformation. Okay? Suppose this was all that we had. Now let's check if it's invariant on a general coordinate transformation. Now by construction, since psi is a scalar, del mu psi is a 0 1 tensor, rank 0 1 tensor, right? RA omega mu, okay? This we have seen is linear in omega mu. Right? And omega mu is a rank 0 1 tensor, so RA omega mu is also a rank 0 1 tensor. So d mu psi will be a rank 0 1 tensor. But gamma mu's are declared to be just fixed matrices, right?
Yes.
Okay, gamma mu's have to fix once and for all, they are just matrices. Okay. In which case gamma mu's don't transform at all on a general coordinate transformation. Okay, so this will not be invariant. Okay, this transforms as a, the fact that gamma mu carries the index mu doesn't necessarily mean that it transforms as a rank 1 0 tensor, right? It's just a set of matrices. Okay. So if that was, if this was all that we had, then this would not be invariant on a general coordinate transformation. So the idea is that we try to make gamma mu into a rank 1 0 tensor. And the way we do it is by defining gamma mu as gamma hat as E mu A gamma hat A, where these are now declared as fixed matrices. Gamma hat A, gamma hat B is minus beta B. Okay, this is anti-commutator of gamma hat A with gamma hat.
So actually the standard matrices are this.
Yeah, so the standard matrices are these gamma hats. Okay? If you want to use the symbol gamma, I will not write gamma mu, I will just directly write E mu A gamma I. Okay? So let me write the Dirac equation then more explicitly. So I E mu A gamma A d mu minus n psi. Now you see, at least on a general coordinate transformation, everything is fine. Right? Why? Because d mu psi, as we have already seen, this transforms as a rank 1 0 1 tensor, right? A covariant vector. E mu A transforms as a contravariant vector. Right? On a general coordinate transformation. So it's contracted, okay, and hence this is a scalar. E mu A, d mu psi is a scalar, m psi of course is a scalar. Okay? So this combination is invariant under general coordinate transformation, and hence if psi satisfies the equation of Dirac equation, then its general coordinate transform will also automatically satisfy the equations. Is that point clear?
Sir,
Yes.
here we said that RA is same as those matrices.
Yes, yes.
Because of those relations that we proved yesterday, the last one, that if RA is a representation.
Yes, so I'll come to Lorentz transformation, right? Yes, so it's because of that, but that by itself is not completely enough, right? We have to do some work to prove the Lorentz invariance of this equation. Okay, but the reason that we use RA is because of that, right? And that we are going to use. Okay, some property of d mu.
Sir, is this the Dirac equation in a curved space-time?
Yes, so this is the Dirac equation in a curved space-time.
And so then, would we get the same thing when we do this, the action formalism? Or like
Yes, so the action formalism is very easy. I mean, all you have to do is that you put a psi bar here. Okay, so we'll discuss this. Okay, but if this is the Dirac equation, okay, then it can be obtained by an action of this form. Okay, so this is the Dirac action in curved space. Okay, psi bar is psi dagger gamma naught. Okay, or psi dagger gamma hat naught.
and these gamma matrices will, the gamma matrices in curved space-time are basically product of E's and the normal flat space-time gamma.
Exactly. So we can forget about the flat space time. Sorry, let me write it hard here. We can forget about the curved space gammas at all, right? We can always work with flat space time gammas and write EX basically.
EX will be the function of what geometry you are at.
Yeah, so U will be a function of X, right? Exactly. And it will be a function of the geometry. For different geometries, you will have a different.
This will reduce to the flat space Dirac equation when.
Yeah, because in flat space you can take E mu A to be identity matrix, delta mu A.
And RA.
Yeah, d mu will become ordinary derivative del mu, right? Because omega mu is 0 there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this becomes just standard Dirac equation, right? That of course is a consistency. That in flat space it should reduce to standard Dirac equation, okay, which it does. Is this point clear? Okay. So this equation that you have written passes two tests. One is that in flat space it gives the standard Dirac equation. The second is that it's invariant under general coordinate transformation. Okay. But we have to now check that it's invariant under local Lorentz transformation. Right? Because local Lorentz symmetry is essential, because otherwise those degrees of extra degrees of freedom that E had cannot be removed.
Yes.
Right? So if you are claiming that this is a theory of gravity, the local Lorentz symmetry better be there as an exact symmetry of the theory. Right? Otherwise you cannot use it to transform away those extra components of E. Okay? So you have to now check that this equation is also invariant under local Lorentz transformation. Is that clear?
So when we said define this gamma hat is,
Yes.
we didn't comment anything about how they transform under local Lorentz transform.
No, gamma matrices are the same gamma matrices that you use in flat space. It satisfies this equation. They don't transform.
Because I'm saying that in this equation, the equation in curved space,
Yes.
the flat space index A is contracted for the first term,
Yes.
and d mu A psi is by definition we know that it's invariant under local Lorentz transformation.
No, it's not invariant. It's covariant. That's important. Right? So you'll have to use this. So you have to check now how to. So that's why I said local Lorentz transformation is more complicated, because if you just I will think of it, right? This index transforms, right? This one doesn't. These are fixed matrices. Right? So how does this become invariant under local Lorentz transformation? Okay. So for that we have to do some work. Just like to prove the covariance of the ordinary Dirac equation in flat space, you have to do some work, right? You have to do some manipulations of taking this R through gamma. In that process, the gammas get rotated. Okay, so you have to carry out the manipulation. Okay, so local Lorentz, we have not said anything so far. Okay, that is left till the end. The only thing you have said is that the general coordinate transformation leaves this invariant. So this is gamma hat, gamma hat. The same gamma matrices that we had used in flat space. Okay. With those gamma matrices, if we define R, okay, so what is the point? Let me emphasize the key ingredient. So the point is that R of lambda that we have defined, okay, is the old definition. Okay, whatever you had in flat space, right? Flat space, given any matrix, any Lorentz transform matrix lambda, there is a rule that tells you how to calculate R of lambda, right? That rule was basically starting from here you could integrate or exponentiate to get the group element out of lambda. Right? This gives the infinitesimal element, right? You could integrate. And since you are using the same matrices, right? Physically these are the same matrices that you had used earlier, right? So if earlier R satisfies some identities, this new R will also satisfy the same identity because it's the same R. The same rule that tells you given a lambda how to go to R. Okay. But the only additional thing is that now we will allow the lambdas to depend on X. Okay. But that is not going to change the identity that we had, in particular neither of these two identities, because neither of these have any derivative with respect to X. Right. So these are just matrix identities. Okay. So it doesn't matter if lambda depends on X. Right. Point by point in X, these identities should work. Is that clear? Okay, so we'll use that. Now we can save some work because that we have already done. We know that if so psi double prime, okay, first you have to define, so we have to test whether it's invariant or local Lorentz transformation, okay, but for that we have to first define what local Lorentz transformation is, right, okay, of psi. We have not said anything so far, okay, we have only said that psi is scalar and a general coordinate transformation. So psi double prime of X, okay, the local Lorentz transformation will define exactly in the same way that we have been doing for the fields that carry flat space index. Okay. Namely, whatever matrix was multiplying that field, okay, under ordinary Lorentz transformation, we use the same matrix. So R lambda, but we keep in mind that this is not the standard Lorentz transformation. Okay, so this is R lambda times psi of X. Okay, we don't change the argument. Okay, just like for the fields carrying flat space index, we didn't change the argument, right? Okay, we just wrote R lambda X times the field at the same point X. Local Lorentz transformation doesn't act on the space-time point. Okay, it doesn't change the space-time. So this will be our declared transformation law of psi. So this is what we declared.
So here it will be like this, that that side X prime and that side X.
No, it will not be, because
Local.
it's local Lorentz transformation. It's basically, so this we are using the insight from Dirac equation, okay, only to know that this identity is true. Okay. Now we are making use of that simply by saying we use the same matrix to define what is our local Lorentz transformation. Right? But this is not the standard Lorentz transformation that you are familiar with, okay, because we are not changing the argument X in this transformation. Okay. As we did in the case of the fields with flat index, right? AA, for example, when it transformed, right, the transformation acted on the index A, right? Produced that matrix lambda multiplying the index A. But the argument of A didn't get changed. So the same principle you will use here. So given this, we already know from our analysis of last time that this holds. Okay, this is what we had shown last time, and the only ingredient in this proof was this relation. Right? Relation 1. The matrices satisfy this relation. Is this point clear? Okay, so we are going to use this now to establish the local Lorentz invariance of the Dirac equation. So you need to calculate I E double prime mu A of X gamma A E double prime mu minus m psi double. Okay, I'll not write in the argument x explicitly because x remains x all the time. So this I'll write now. Sorry, I inside the bracket. So this is I e double prime mu a. Okay, we know how it transforms. This transforms as eta lambda eta ab e mu b. Okay. Gamma n of course doesn't transform. D mu double prime psi double prime becomes r lambda d mu psi.
So, this second relation it holds for gamma mu's or gamma hat a's?
This one,
No, the second relation that r lambda is.
this is gamma hats, because those are the matrices that are used, right? So r lambda has to be constructed using the gamma hat matrices. Okay, that's why when I wrote down RA of M, I used the sigma hats. This was I by 2 M eta M AB sigma hat AB. Right? Because these are the ones which are using the old gamma matrices.
No, I'm saying that the second relation that r lambda satisfies, that r lambda inverse.
Oh, this is with gamma I now. Yes.
This will be
Yeah, with gamma. Exactly. So let me change that.
That is for fixed gamma.
Fixed gamma, yeah, because this R lambda is the same matrices, right? So you have to basically use the same matrices here, right? As the flat space matrix. So it's gamma hat. Okay, so it's the same relation but written in this new language. Is this clear? Okay, so the point is that R lambdas are a fixed set of rules that tells you given a lambda how to construct R. Okay? Those rules use the matrices gamma hat. Okay? And the various identities that we had used earlier are based on some choice of gamma matrices. Those choice of gamma matrices are what we are calling gamma hat now, right? Not gamma mu. Okay? Forget about gamma mu. We don't have any gamma mu anymore. Okay, or you can forget about what I wrote earlier, forget about gamma mu and call these gamma hats as gammas, okay? But with flat index. Is this clear? Okay, the second relation holds with these gamma hats. Okay, because gamma hats are the same old matrices that we had earlier in flat space.
Sir, why these relations? D mu double prime psi prime.
Oh, because this is what we established last time. You remember this is exactly what we derived last time, right? That if d mu is derived, if d mu is defined this way, if d mu psi is defined as del mu
Okay.
plus Ra omega mu psi, where Ra is derived from an R which satisfies this relation,
Oh, okay.
then d mu automatically satisfies this.
Yes.
Right? So the general derivation irrespective of which representation you use.
Yes.
Right? The only thing that went into this derivation was this relation. That's why we can use this.
Yeah.
Is that clear? Minus m or lambda psi. So these are all gamma hats. Okay, so in fact I'll never write. I mean, whenever I write gamma, it will be gamma hats because I'll only use gammas with flat space index. Okay, so gamma mu's you don't need to have introduced a word. Now we use again this relation, okay, to replace gamma hat a R by R lambda, lambda ab gamma hat b. this is gamma hat C. So that takes care of this part, and then du psi. Now look at this product. Here you see the row index here is contracted to the row index here. Right? You cannot think of it as a matrix product unless you take a transpose. Okay. So let's think of this as a lambda transpose with C as a row index, A as a column index.
Yes.
So we can write this then as I times lambda transpose eta lambda eta. Now the column index of this is contracted to the row index of this, so it's a matrix product lambda transpose eta lambda eta. So the first index is C and the second index is B. R lambda has gotten misplaced somewhere, so R lambda. See this R lambda we can write anywhere, okay? Because these are all just numbers as far as the spinor space is concerned, right? These are not gamma matrices.
Yes.
Okay, so R lambda we can just write to the extreme left. It's not a, because these are just numbers from that. So R lambda is right here. So minus m R lambda psi. And now you are almost done. Lambda transpose eta lambda is eta. Because lambda is a Lorentz transversal matrix.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is eta. So eta square is identity. Right? So this whole thing is just delta C. So that basically allows you to replace the C by B. So you get R lambda I E mu B. This gamma hat becomes gamma hat B. Minus m R lambda psi. So the final step is you just write R lambda outside I E B gamma psi minus m. Is this okay? So now we see that this was the original drag equation, right? So if psi satisfies the drag equation, that means this is 0. And this in turn means that this vanishes. So psi double prime satisfies drag equation, but of course we transformed E double prime and omega. So this then establishes that the drag equation that we had written down, this equal to 0, is invariant under local Lorentz transformation. Is this clear? Okay. So here you can see that that this analysis is a little more subtle than what we had earlier precisely because of this fact that gamma looks like it carries an index A, right? Which should transform on a Lorentz transform, local Lorentz transformation. But gamma is a fixed matrices, so it doesn't transform on a local Lorentz transformation. Okay? But effectively what happens is that this R lambda that the spinors pick up, when they commute with gamma, okay, it effectively rotates gamma. Okay, as if it's an index that's transforming on a local Lorentz transformation. Okay, and that's basically this relation. That when you commute R lambda through this, right, it rotates gamma as if gamma is undergoing a local Lorentz transformation. Even though gammas are fixed matrices, they don't transform.
So that was true for the flat space Dirac equation.
Yeah, that is true for the flat space Dirac equation also, right? That's why when you establish the Lorentz invariance of flat space Dirac equation, there also you have to do some manipulation, right? I mean, it's precisely the same equation, okay, the analog of this equation in flat space which was needed to prove Lorentz invariance of the Dirac equation.
So can we do this for all, if I am having some new equation and then I want to use it for a general relativity? Can I do this?
Yes, for any higher spin field, for example, any representation of Lorentz groups, it has to be a representation of Lorentz group, right? So if you have a representation of the Lorentz group, okay, and if you have the equation that is invariant under flat space Lorentz transformation, okay, then you can follow exactly the same procedure, okay, to make this into a couple to gravity, right, maintaining both general coordinate invariance and local Lorentz invariance.
Like
So,
if they are local Lorentz transformation invariant, then they will automatically be a local Lorentz transformation in R case. In GTR case also they will be a invariant under local Lorentz transformation.
yeah, so it's the other way. Then if the flat space equation has to be Lorentz invariant, okay, in that case it is guaranteed that when you follow this procedure to couple it to gravity, the Carr space equations will be invariant under local Lorentz transformation.
But for general coordinate transformation,
General coordinate transformation is in fact simpler, right? Because general coordinate transformation, only thing that transforms is mu index, right? Because as long as you take all the gammas to carry flat space index, gammas are not carrying any Carr index, right? So all the Carr index is carried by the e's, okay? So all the index, mu index is automatically contracted, right? And that makes the general coordinate invariance manifest. Okay, general coordinate invariance, okay, becomes tricky only when some fields are not transforming as tensors, right?
yeah, like if assume you have some equation like a mu equals to something like that. So like it's a vector equation, not a scalar kind of equation. Nothing is contracted there.
That's right, but it has to have the same index all through, right? So that equation on a local, on a Lorentz transformation becomes linear combinations of themselves, right? It just gets multiplied by a factor of lambda, right? But an equation, if it's zero, if you multiply by a factor of lambda, right, some matrix, it still remains zero, right? That, I mean, here also it's true, right? If the equation didn't go into the original equation, but it got mixed, it became mixture of the original set of equations, right? This matrix R lambda is multiplying it. Right? It's the same principle for all fields. So the only extra ingredient, so the only ingredient is that you have to use gamma matrices. You always have to treat as if they are carrying flat space index. Okay, convert all gamma mu's, okay, into flat space index by making use of the Fierbians. Okay, because when you write down the gammas in flat space, you contract gamma mu index with partial derivative, right? Gamma mu del mu, right? This is the standard terms which appear in various Dirac equations, okay, or its generalizations to higher spin objects. So that those gamma mu's, you always have to think of this as a E mu a gamma hat a. Okay. Now E mu a transforms nicely under general coordinate transformation. So with this, the general coordinate transformation becomes manifest. Okay. To prove Lorentz invariance, you have to do a little more work, but it's basically the same principle that works there.
My concern is that like there you had a gamma mu.
Yes.
But the equation was not invariant because gamma mu, because of a gamma and having a mu index. It was invariant because your representations were working like that, so that when you sandwich a gamma mu between them, you had again a gamma mu and with a lambda matrix.
Yes.
Right. But here you are.
But in any situation that has to happen, because otherwise the equation will not be invariant under the flat space Lorentz transformation. See, this is not an accident that this gamma satisfies this, right? If this equation had not been satisfied, then the original equation that you start with would not be invariant under flat space Lorentz transformation.
No, but when you are taking like writing a E mu a gamma a,
Yes.
at that point of time you are treating as gamma mu as a vector and then just simply taking out such a thing.
No, gamma mu by definition is E mu a gamma a. Whenever you have gamma mu, you just replace it by E mu a gamma a. Right? That's the rule for constructing the action. or equation of motion.
I am concerned is will this rule is working here, but will such kind of rules will work everywhere?
Yeah, so this will work everywhere as long as you follow this rule, and as long as the original equation that you are trying to generalize, right? You start with a flat space equation and there you use this rule, right? Okay. As long as that flat space equation was invariant on Lorentz transformation, okay, you can show that that automatically shows that this equation will be invariant on local Lorentz transformation. Okay. It's basically the same principle. Okay. I mean, you have used this explicitly, but if you follow this carefully, you will see it's exactly the same manipulation. Okay, that which allowed us to prove Lorentz invariance in the first case, okay, also allows us to prove local Lorentz invariance in the second case, right? The only slight difference is that here you got eta lambda eta, right? There you didn't have something like eta lambda eta. Instead we had some lambda inverse. But this eta lambda eta is nothing but lambda transpose inverse. Okay, so if you had written it this way, then it would have become absolutely clear that it's exactly the same algebraic manipulation that you have to do here to prove local Lorentz invariance as you have to do there to prove ordinary Lorentz invariance. Yeah, and this is, as I said, this principle holds for any arbitrary scale particles.
Sir,
Yes.
in earlier case when we were using principle of general covariance to find out the generalization of equations, say Maxwell's equations in curved space-time.
Yes.
This statement seems to differ from that one, so where is the difference actually coming?
Well, the point it differs from that one because here you are using the Feuerbach formulation, right? For Maxwell's equation, okay, we could have used this kind of formulation by using flat space index, right? The reason that it looked like it was a different procedure is because we are thinking of AMUs as carrying curved space index, right? But when you generalize from the flat space to curved space, from the beginning you could have said that any field will always carry flat space index. Okay, so there if AMU was getting contracted, suppose you have something like AMU del, right? There are various terms in the Maxwell reaction. There are various terms where AMU, the index of AMU gets contracted with del, right? You will always have to think of this as E mu A, del. Okay, that fields will always carry flat index. Okay, if you use that principle, then it will be exactly the same procedure there also.
But converse can happen, like that treatment can be used to generalize Dirac.
No, that's the point. That treatment cannot be used to generalize Dirac because the index that the Dirac spinor carries, okay, cannot be converted to curved index.
Not space-time index.
Not space-time index. Whereas here the index that A carries, right, could be converted to space-time index by multiplying by capital D.
So the fields that are entering, if they are having the direct vector nature or like they are tensor tensors,
Yes,
for that their principle, their general covariance treatment works fine.
exactly. So for them you can use other procedure, right? You can either think of this as a flat space index or think of this as curved space index and do this generalization, and they will give the same result. But for fields which carry index which is not of the tensorial kind, okay, there you have to use this procedure.
So that's why for FMU we could assume the transformation law like the tensor.
Exactly, right? But as I said, you could have used also this kind of transformation, that you can say that the basic fields are not AMU but A hat, right? And try to generalize using this procedure.
So if we Dirac fields can be written in this fashion for the curved space-time, then Klein-Gordon field can also be somehow written.
Yes, but Klein-Gordon of course is somewhat trivial because
No, my question is that we know that in flat space, each component of the Dirac field will satisfy the Klein-Gordon equation.
yes,
So here in the in the curved space-time, every component of the Dirac spinor will satisfy the curved.
no, it will not satisfy the Klein-Gordon equation. What will happen is you will get some extra term, okay, which involves the curvature tensor. Okay, when you try to square it, in the flat space limit, of course, it should satisfy Klein-Gordon equation. Okay? But when you square it, see, you have. I mean, how do we recover the Klein-Gordon equation for flat space? So how do you recover the Klein-Gordon equation for Dirac field in flat space? Right? We take this kinetic operator and square it. Right? We take this this one and we square it. But when you square it, okay, the second time there is a derivative, okay, that will not act on the omega which is sitting inside, okay, producing some curvature term. So for that reason, okay, individual components of the field psi will not satisfy Klein-Gordon equation. Okay, there will be an additional term.
Klein-Gordon in the curved space term.
So Klein-Gordon in the curved space time, but on top of that there will be a term involving the Riemann tensor. Okay. This is true even for electromagnetic field. If you just, it is not special to Dirac field, right? If you take Maxwell's field equation in curved space, okay, there also you can try to convert this to a Klein-Gordon type equation, okay, by going to certain gauge. Okay. But again, there will find that there is an extra term proportional to the Riemann tensor.
Because the principle equivalence is not applicable.
Well, it depends on what you declare as a principle of equivalence, right? Yes, when you think in terms of Klein-Gordon, right, then yes, it's not satisfying principle of equivalence, right? But in the original form, it did satisfy principle of equivalence. Yeah, are there any other questions? Okay, so let me now say a few words about the action. Yeah, I will not do very much. So, as when you do first quantized Dirac equation, of course the equations are enough, right? The Dirac equation is sufficient. But in the second quantized theory, often you need the action. So in flat space, the action of the Dirac field is this psi bar I gamma mu del mu minus n psi, where psi bar is psi dagger gamma naught. Okay, and if you use variational principle, you can recover the Dirac equation from here. Okay, you just can think of psi and psi dagger as independent variables and vary. And this has the property that this is invariant under Lorentz transformation. Okay. And the way that holds is that this part, so under Lorentz transformation, psi of x, psi prime of x is r lambda, psi of lambda inverse x, right? So what we had found is that I gamma mu del mu minus m psi prime, this becomes r lambda times I gamma mu del y mu minus n psi y. Okay, where y is lambda inverse x. This is what we had proven earlier, right? This is ordinary Lorentz transformation in flat space. This is in flat space. Now, one can show that psi bar prime, which by definition is psi prime dagger gamma naught. This is psi dagger of lambda inverse x times r lambda dagger gamma naught. Right? This is just straightforward, but the non-trivial property is that this quantity is given by gamma naught r lambda inverse. Okay, this is generally true, but I'll leave it as an exercise to check for infinitesimal transformation. So this r lambda inverse essentially cancels this. Okay. So because of this, we have a relation x I gamma mu del mu minus n psi of x equal to psi bar prime of y times I gamma mu del y mu
Then what do you have to show in exercise?
That this R lambda dagger gamma naught is gamma naught times R lambda inverse.
Same equation both.
Pardon?
This both are same equation.
So shouldn't you write
Psi
psi bar?
Sorry, psi bar. Yes, thank you. This is psi bar. Yes. So this is a transform field we are using. Right? So basically what did we do? We showed that this quantity is R lambda times this quantity, right? And now we are saying that this psi bar prime is psi bar times R lambda inverse. Okay, so the R lambda inverse cancels R lambda and you get this identity. Okay. So the action involves an integral d4x. Okay, because d4x is the same as d4y. In flat space there is no difference between integrating of x and y. Okay, that shows the equality of the Dirac action. Okay, the Lorentz invariance of the Dirac action in flat space. Is this okay? And the idea is that exactly the same manipulation you can use to show the Lorentz invariance of the local Lorentz invariance of the Dirac action in curved space. So in curved space, the Dirac action in presence of gravity where psi bar is now defined, psi bar of x is psi x dagger times gamma hat naught. The general coordinate invariance is automatic, right? Because this is general coordinate invariant. Psi bar is general coordinate invariant. Right? Nothing is it's transformed as a scalar. Okay? And this of course is general coordinate invariant integration. Right? So general coordinate invariance is straightforward. Okay? On a local Lorentz transformation, so under local Lorentz transformation, integral d4x this is what you have to calculate, right? And you have to show that this is equal to the original action. So x doesn't change at all in the local Lorentz transformation. Right? So d4x is d4x. What about determinant t double prime? Is determinant t, right? Lorentz transformation has a unit determinant. So this gives you determinant t. Psi bar double prime is psi dagger or lambda dagger gamma hat naught. right? Because psi bar double prime is psi double prime dagger times gamma hat. So that's this. This one we have already seen is given by r lambda times I gamma hat A mu A du minus n psi. This is what we showed already. Now the same identity that was used in proving the local Lorentz the ordinary Lorentz invariance in flat space
Yes.
shows that r lambda dagger gamma hat naught is gamma hat naught r lambda inverse. So this is gamma hat naught r lambda inverse, okay, which of course cancels with this, and we get back integral d4x determinant t psi bar, okay, because psi dagger gamma hat naught is now psi bar. So this is the original action. Okay, so this proves the invariance of this action under local Lorentz transformation. Okay, again you can do this for higher spin theory also. Okay, the principle is the same. Okay, you can start with the action that you had in flat space. Okay, and you can couple it to gravity in this way. Any questions? Okay, so I think today maybe I'll not start on something new. So next time we'll start discussing cosmology, and that will be the last topic of this course. Okay, which will be basically we will use the techniques that we have learned, okay, the rules of general relativity, to study the evolution of the universe as a whole.